My name is John Semmel. I am the Director of Information Technology for Microsol Resources, and today we will be discussing BIM 360. Most of this is going to be an overview of the general concepts, but we will also be getting into some specific elements of the system, notably the design collaboration module. As many of you may recall, Revit was originally designed in sort of the earlier days of information technology, when there wasn't necessarily an expectation of being able to share this kind of information across offices. So Revit was developed, in other words, to work on a local area network within one specific office. But it didn't take long before people started realizing how powerful the software was and wanted to find ways to be able to use it across multiple environments, across different geographic areas, for example. Since the system was not really designed that way, there became some issues, which they tried to solve originally with sending files via FTP, maybe email, using WAN acceleration technology, file sharing services. Autodesk also has a solution which it still maintains, which is Revit Server. And all of these solutions, they had certain advantages, but also certain disadvantages. So on one hand, you would be able to get the files across, but you wouldn't be able to work simultaneously in real time. If you were using Revit Server, you could do that, but it was really only a site-to-site option. So for example, if you have an office in Los Angeles and another in New York, Revit Server worked well for that, but it was not really ideal for working with third parties. The other solutions all basically involve taking an entire model and kind of sending it across. In part, for those who are technologically inclined, the big issue is latency. So Revit is really a database and is trying to coordinate all this information in real time. And if there's too much of a delay between getting the information from one location to the other, then the database is not really going to understand or keep track of properly which user is controlling which data. So latency becomes a big issue, and it can cause performance issues. It can cause slow response times. It can even corrupt the model in some situations. And even Revit Server had a little bit of an issue with latency. If you're using Revit Server and the connection between the two offices was more than, say, 100 milliseconds, you were very likely to experience similar issues. So, around 2015, Autodesk developed a new cloud-based system. Originally, it was BIM 360 Team, combined with what was known as Collaboration for Revit. And recently, they have updated this to a new system, which is BIM 360 Design. So this is a new platform. They still do maintain compatibility with the old systems, but if you're using Revit 2019, 20 or later, you will be working on BIM 360 Design. So a few features of BIM 360 Design. One is that it's fully integrated into Revit applications. So you don't need to install any additional software other than the occasional update. It's right in the software, as we will see later when I do a demonstration. The authoritative copy of the model is kept in the cloud. So this is a similar concept to your central model, but basically the real key copy is going to be kept in a cloud service. And what the client machine does is it caches data on the client machine. So you're still using your own hardware to edit the model, to make changes, to view the model, is going to be using all that. And all that's going to be sent back and forth is the model data that's required. The back end is Amazon S3. So this hosts the BIM 360 Docs environment, BIM 360 Design, and it also handles the Revit Collaboration Worksharing. So as some of you may know, this is a highly robust data environment, and it's also one of the most secure environments that's available. So in a lot of respects, this will be better backup and redundancy than what you get in your own environment. There are also options to make local copies of what you're working on. So if you want to capture some of this data or capture versions of these models for maybe the end of a phase, or maybe even you want something at the end of a week that you capture with your normal backup, that's an option in there. The performance at this point is very similar to working on a traditional LAN environment. It won't necessarily be quite as fast, but it should be pretty good. And it works anywhere that you have an internet connection. So it is also now available for international use. Also, just so you know, in terms of licensing, if you purchase a BIM 360 design license in the United States, you are able to use that anywhere in the world. So basically, if you're at a construction site, if you've got a remote user, and if you want to work with a third party, all that works really well with BIM 360 design. We should also note that BIM 360 design is part of a family of cloud services and offerings from Autodesk. So for example, BIM 360 design is built on the BIM 360 Docs platform, and we'll be looking at a lot of that today. So a lot of what we're talking about will just be Docs, but design adds to that the Revit collaboration work-sharing portion. There's also BIM 360 coordination, BIM 360 build. There are other offerings like Ops and Plan, all of which will use BIM 360 Docs as that sort of key front end and storage. A few more features. The Docs environment lets you do file sharing and versioning. So we'll talk a little bit about versioning, but basically every time that you do a sync with Central or what's called a publish, we'll talk about that in a little bit, then you can go back to those versions and you can share those versions. The key obviously here is simultaneous multi-site coordination. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the idea is just that you can basically have full teams from the same firm, from different firms, all working on the same models simultaneously in real time, just like you do your normal work sharing. BIM 360 Docs also adds some construction management features, which we'll touch on today: reviews, transmittals, issues, and a fair amount of what we will be talking about today will be the design collaboration module. And basically that's to make snapshots and track changes. You can also use the design collaboration module to make a version of the model that you can link in to an existing Revit model. So we'll do a little bit of a demonstration. I do just want to let everybody know I am coming at this from the IT perspective. I am not an architect, so there is the chance that my architectural colleagues will correct a few items. But let's start with the BIM 360 Docs interface. So again, BIM 360 Docs is available as a separate product, so if you're just interested in that, or if you have someone who is maybe administering the site and does not need the Revit collaboration portion, this is what they will be looking at. So as you can see here, we've got this project home page, and this is actually very similar to what is called the Insight module. So basically, you've got some information that you can see right off the bat when you get in. It's got a list of issues. It's got design packages. It's even got the weather. So the first module we're going to look at is the document management. So for the people who want something just very simple, all they want to do is just share models, then they will be occasionally dipping into this. They don't need to do necessarily a lot of complex features, but you will need at least one folder, and you'll start putting your models into these folders. Just so you know, the plans section, this is basically for construction management. When you upload a Revit model into the plans section, it's going to automatically generate all these views. And I believe these are all PDFs. So basically the idea is it's the digital equivalent to a printed set of contract drawings. So just keep in mind that when you are working in BIM 360 design, Your normal work is all going to go into project files. Plans should only be for construction management and only when you need to break up that model for that purpose. So as you can see here, we've got a number of different folders. We've got the architecture team, we've got our acoustic consultants, we've got our structural team. We could also create a folder. So we could do MEP team, for example. So in each of these, you can put your files. I'll show you a little later how you would upload a model to allow it for use in Revit. Meantime, we can take a look at some of the options here. One key is permissions. So basically, in order to get access to this project at all, the project administrator needs to invite the user. That user also will need a license of BIM 360 Design if they want to work in real time in Revit. So as you can see, we've got users, we've got a variety of security options. So this gives you a lot of control. It gives the administrator a lot of ability to fine-tune who can look at what. So for example, Nick is on the architecture team, and let's say I don't want him to see what's going on with the acoustic consultants. He doesn't have permissions, so he will not be able to see anything that's in the acoustic consultants. So if you want to segregate third parties, you want to segregate teams, you want to have a lot of control over who has access to what. You don't necessarily want your structural team to edit your architectural model, then you can set that up this way, and you can make sure that everybody has the permissions that are appropriate. And of course, if you choose, you could also make it a very open, high trust environment, and you can add the sharing. So I could add Roger from the acoustic team. And I can set his permission level to view, download, and upload. I can let him edit. So there's a lot of different options here for what you can do. Another little handy feature, in case you need it, is that you can lock a model. So basically, this just makes sure that no one edits it. You need to have edit or higher permissions in order to lock or unlock a model. So in this case, let's see who's on our architecture team again. I think it was Nick. So Nick and Roger can view that, but while it's locked, they can't edit it. And they can't unlock it either. So we're going to be working on this, so we will unlock it. One handy feature, which is common to a lot of Autodesk options and applications, is the viewer. We'll see a slightly different version of this in a few minutes. So this is basically pulling from the views in the model. So this is a three-dimensional viewer. You can do numerous different views of the model. This is obviously the Revit sample model, so I'm sure that some of you are familiar with it. They've even included the solar analysis. And then there's some tools in here that you can use. So for example, I can hide the roof so I can see what's going on inside. Or let's say I only want to see this floor. I can isolate that. So we're only seeing the floor. Show everything. We also have first-person walkthrough view. Oops. Sorry, I know it's a little confusing to watch sometimes, but basically you can do a nice little walkthrough. Go back to our default view. You can measure objects. So you don't necessarily need to open the application to do that. You can also measure angles. Okay, I'm a little sloppy. I apologize for that. I'm sure that the window is 90 degrees. But you do have some tools in here which are very handy. You also have a properties window. So if I want to know what's in Revit about this wall, I need to open the Revit model, right? So I can find out what's going on with the model. And keep in mind that if you don't have the Revit application, but you do have a license of Docs, then you can use this. So for example, if you've got someone who is at the client, maybe they're a decision maker, or maybe there's someone who just wants to see what the progress is, but they don't use Revit, they don't have a license of Revit, they don't want to get involved in that, they can use this viewer to get an idea of what's going on. So, other features in here, as I mentioned earlier, you can see we have reviews, transmittals, issues. So these are more for construction management, obviously. So I've got the model, and I can submit for review. You can create your own workflows. In this case, I created a two-step workflow. And submit. I believe this one goes to one of my colleagues, so I'm the notify reviewer. And let's say I want Nick. Take a look at this. And now he's going to get an email, which indicates that there's a two-step review open. We can go through it. So, and transmittals pretty much works the same way. We pick the item. And send that to Nick. And keeps track of all the transmittals in here. See what was sent. So you can still use this system in pretty much a traditional way if you really wanted to. And along those lines, you can also just use Docs as a repository to upload and download files without necessarily using the collaboration portion. So I do think that in most cases you'll find that the full design package, which has the Revit collaboration work sharing, is obviously more powerful and is relevant to a lot of situations. But we still do have customers where all they need to do is send files back and forth. They just want to upload and download, and they want to track. They want to be able to see who's done what. And you can do that with just the Docs portion. So we should be able to download the file if we need to. You may also notice here we've got this version. So I can actually go back to multiple versions if I need to. And so can someone else. So for example, if someone needs to look at what was being done at the very start of the project, they can go back to that. They can download it, or they can make it current. And you can even compare versions. So we'll see a little more about the compare in a minute. When we go into the design collaboration, we're almost there. I just want to show you this real quick. So as you can see, the objects that changed are highlighted in green. Everything else is grayed out. You can change the disciplines, so you can narrow it down a little bit to see what's being affected. So this is a very powerful tool, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's a little more control over this in the design collaboration portion, but obviously this can be great for trying to figure out, you could see who did a certain sync or who did a publish and what they did. We should also note that in Docs, you can also use non-Autodesk documents. And we'll take a look at the desktop connector in a little bit, but basically you can see here we've got an Excel file, and if you have a license of Office 365, then you can actually use that to edit these documents. So that's a very, very powerful feature. And again, it's still got the versioning. So if you are working on an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, or you have images, then it's going to be able to version all of those. And I just want to show you real quick, we have the Insight module. As I mentioned earlier, this is basically very similar to what you have on the desktop home. One nice feature of the Insight module is that you can add third party. If you have new Forma, you can connect that. Microsoft Power BI, Smartsheet. So there's a lot, and they're adding more of these all the time. So, and these are fully functional. So if you bring in a Smartsheet and link it, I apologize for not having that ready at the moment, but if you bring that in and you link it, then you can actually edit those Smartsheets right in this dashboard. So this is a really great way to centralize a lot of the data that you're working on. So the next module is design collaboration. So the idea behind this is that you're making snapshots of the model and the project at specific times. And you've got a timeline which shows you where they are, what you've done, and you can also share it with teams. So in this case, as you can see, we've set up a couple of teams. I happen to be on all these teams, which is why I'm seeing all of this. So we could see the acoustic consultants team, right? So I'm on the acoustic consultants team, so it can see that there are these packages here. I've been working mostly in the architecture team, so let's just work on this real quick. So we can see here, this is a created package. This is a model that's just been published and has not yet been turned into a package. So to do that, we just go to the end, we hit the plus, and we create a new package. We decide what sets we want to put in it. I'll show you later how to decide what goes into a set, but as you can see, once you've got the set, you can pick which views you want, and all of these views are going to go into the package. It even tells you up here 17 sheets, 7 3D views, and the project model. So now that I've got this, as you can see, it's the same viewer that we were looking at earlier, with basically all the same tools. And again, I can use the Show Changes module, see if it picks up anything. Yep. So we can see that this table moved, and it says exactly how much it moved by. And then we can see where it was before. So again, this is a very powerful tool. Now, you may wonder why you would have all these different teams, why you would have these timelines, why you might want to share. And again, if you keep in mind, when we're in the document management, we've decided that for the architecture team, the only people who can see the architecture models right now is Nick and Roger and myself. So if I want someone on the structural team to be able to see this model, if they try to go through it through Revit directly, they're going to get blocked. And they're not going to be able to open it or edit it. So what I can do in design collaboration is I've got a package, which I just created. Now I can share. So the package, say architecture team 2019, 1029, demo package. And I share it. So now it's changed from that from this sort of dotted empty circle to a full blue circle because our team is sharing it. So now, if someone is on the structural team and they need to see the architectural model because they have to use it to link into the structural model, they can select it and see here, consume. So what consume means is it's going to bring it into the team space and it's going to update the links. So now someone who's on the structural team will be able to link that package. And I'll show you the process to actually do the link in a little bit when we move to the Revit module. But the idea is that this way you don't have to set up another folder, you don't have to make a copy, you don't have to try and fuss around with a lot of the security provisions. You can make it possible for the third party to see exactly the model that you want without editing it and frozen in time at a specific date, time, sync, publish. So that way, this gives you a lot of control over the process. And if you keep sharing, then they can see other items. And again, now they can also just view it through this viewer if that's what you want. So you could even have like an owner team, and you can share models with the owners, and they won't be editing it. They'll just be able to use the viewer. And that will be good for that kind of security setup. So let's see. Another handy feature. Let me get back to the view. Is, and this is a recent addition, by the way. This is a project status. So this tells us what's been going on in the project. And you can see also who this person who last edited it, when it was published. And it even gives you little details if you really want to wonk out, but you shouldn't need to really worry about this. So this is just a handy way to kind of keep track of who's doing what in the project based on the design collaboration module. Another addition, recent addition, is that you can actually add Revit models that are not enabled for collaboration for Revit now. This is another new feature. I believe it was added in August. So the idea is that if you have a Revit model or even a Revit LT, someone is not working with the BIM 360 design portion, they're not working with the Revit collaboration portion, they can still upload a model and you can still make a package and you can still share it and use it for linking. So now we're just going to take a look real quick at how this works in Revit. So Revit 2020, you can see over here, we have the BIM 360. We can even choose what account. Most of the time you'll be working with one account, but if you're working with other firms, you'll see other accounts. So you'll see that this basically has the same folder structure as what we were seeing here. So we've got all our folders, we've got plans and project files, right? And then when I go into project files, you've got the acoustic team, we've got the architecture team, etc. You may notice that there's this shared. So what happens is every time that a team shares out a package, it gets it should go in here. Sorry, I don't know why it's misbehaving. My apologies. What you can do as well, you can go into the consume folder. Okay, I don't know why the packages are not showing up. Let me check structural. Okay, normally these would be open. I think it's maybe because we're looking at the browser instead of linking. My apologies. So we'll go into the architecture team. Here's our model. We're going to open it up and you'll see the performance. Again, this is very similar to working on a LAN. Uploading a model and doing syncs are also pretty much the same. So everything works normally. Go into my level 1. We've got our tables. Move my table. Scroll over. And then as per normal, let's go to collaborate. Synchronize with central. And you can see, works very fast. Obviously, this is not a huge model, but you can tell this is still pretty close to working on a LAN. So, and again, everything works normally. Right now, this is actually working on a cached version of the model, which is stored on my computer. So when I do the sync with Central, a few things are happening. One is that it's sending my changes to the authoritative copy in the cloud, which is at Amazon S3 servers. In the background, all the other computers that are on this project and have worked on this model are going to download all the changes. So that's going on in the background. So when I hit Sync with Central, it's also going to incorporate all the latest changes that are from all the other nodes. And that way I get everything, and everything works in real time. As I mentioned earlier, we have sets. So to do that, we go into this Publish Settings. We've got our sets. Obviously, these sets are based on the views that are in the project browser. So I can create a new set, set 3. And I'm going to decide what I want. And I can even leave out a bunch of views. Maybe I don't want that solar analysis. So this is obviously just a selection. So I save. Oh. So as I've been hinting at for a little while, there's a feature called Publish. And you get to that through the Manage Cloud Models, which hopefully will come up. It seems to be a little stuck. Let me try reopening the model. All right, I think we have a little technical, little glitch in the matrix. Let me see if I can just get out of Revit. Just be a minute. So the idea behind the Publish is that every time you do a synchronization with Central, what's going to happen is every single sync from every user is stored at the Amazon S3 servers. But you don't necessarily want every single one of those to be publicly available to everybody who's looking at BIM 360 design. So that's where the Publish feature comes in. And the idea behind the Publish is that it basically takes that most recent synchronization and makes it available through the BIM 360 Docs interface. And in doing so, it also acts as another snapshot. It's less of a fixed item than the packages. But when we go into the Docs interface, and you see here there's this version 6, which we looked at earlier, each of these are Publish. So when I go in and I tell Revit that I want to publish a model, this is where it ends up. Let's go back to our test project. Hopefully we can get into the module. And a similar benefit is that if you want, you can download the model after you've published it and then make it, again, a local copy for your own use if you want to use it for backup, for example. So, okay, there we go. So this is the Manage Cloud Models feature. You have to have a model that's in BIM 360 open in order to access it. So we'll go into our test project. So here are a couple of models that are in that project. And you see a little check mark, meaning the latest version is published. And this is not, so I can publish latest. Before I do that, this little actions thing. See the view versions. So you can see there's 9 versions in here, but there are 6 synced with Central, because 6 published versions. Each of these is a sync with Central. So there's going to be more of these than there will be a Publish. And if you want, you can roll back to an earlier version. Just keep in mind, if you roll back, you're going to delete all the newer versions, and you're going to orphan anybody who is in these versions. So if I go back to the version from 10:03 a.m., it's going to delete 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's going to block anybody who's currently working in 9. So that's another reason why sometimes it's handy to do a publish, because that way you can, if you have a problem, normally you just have to roll back a couple of syncs. But you may also want to have a published version from maybe the night before, and that way you have a copy that you can download and you can open and you can fix, hopefully before whatever real problems came up. So one nice thing is that this is all happening in the background, so we don't need to keep this open. We can keep going back and get back to work doing this. So now let's talk a little bit about links. And again, I was hinting at this earlier. So when we go into the links, it's going to give us an option. So this is just this is going from what's known as the desktop connector. This is an application that you can download from Autodesk that works in conjunction with the Windows operating system. So let me just show you real quick. Here's our BIM 360. Here's our test site. Here's our test project files. And we're right back at here. So if I wanted to edit this Excel spreadsheet, I could do it right here. So you do have to keep in mind this works similar to Dropbox or Box, where the last save wins. You should not open this directly to edit a model in Revit. Not recommended. I think the system would let you do it, but I think that you would run into a lot of problems. It would be similar to trying to open a Revit model directly over Dropbox. There's no file locking, there's no simultaneous coordination, you're just going to crop the model. So just be careful about that. But you can link. In this case, what you want to do usually is you want to go into these consume folders. If you remember earlier when we were in the module, design collaboration, we consumed package. So when we did that, made a copy. Oops. Should have made a copy in there. Maybe I did from structural team. All right. Sorry, I don't know why the files aren't showing up. We could try shared. Yeah, I apologize. I don't know why it's not showing me what it should. But this is generally where you would bring in a link. And again, because it's from the package, it should be pretty much fixed. It should be secured, and it should be static. When you create a new package, it will automatically overwrite that. So that's a pretty thorough overview of what's going on with BIM 360 design and docs, and a lot of the integration, and a lot of the modules. One last thing that I wanted to point out, and we'll have a link to this in the chat window, the BIM 360 release notes. This is a blog that Autodesk has been putting out, which tells you everything that has been worked on and updated in all the BIM 360 modules and offerings. So we've got BIM 360 Docs, we've got BIM 360 Design, we've got BIM 360 Field. And for example, if we look at a recent post, we've got BIM 360 Design in August. As I mentioned, there was the project status, support for all Revit files. So they really keep on top of not only adding features, but making sure that everybody knows what these features are. And you can even get a video, and there's more full posts. So if you're going to be using BIM 360 Design and you really want to leverage all the capabilities, this is a great resource.